Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to do a special selection today, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes at us from Colby. It says Teratology by the Physics House Band. Check out the live recording of this instrumental experimental rock track. I'm sold. I don't even know what's going on here. I see a really cool trio of people, but mostly the Physics House Band, Teratology, and Experimental Instrumental. All these things just tell me I'm in for a good time. So, let's check out what the Physics House Band is doing. Ooh, we got padded mallets. Our drummer has their shirt tucked in with a belt. I know we're in for a good time. We got someone who's probably classically trained. Nice little switch up there. Yeah, it's got a nice little haunting vibe, but a sick groove. That bass lick hit me. Interesting. Oh, this bassist is gonna knock me off my feet. Oh, what? Oh, yes. Got some cross stick going on, lightening the mood just a little bit. Love that bass tone. And it works so good for this moody stuff and like the faster, sharper attacks. Oh, that dynamic roll. love the shift from the 3 cluster to like 3 time. All that movement for like this real quiet, subtle stuff. I love the way this guitarist's melodic flow balances out the chaotic intensity of both the drummer and the bassist. Or it doesn't balances. I don't remember if it cancels or balances. It balances it out though. Oh, those polyrhythms on the cymbal. Oh man. What was up with the tom? Yeah, what? I'm pretty sure this is in 4/4, but the rhythms are all over the place on it, really pushing against the downbeat in bars 2 and 4 of this 4-bar phrase. Yes! Bring it home. Bring it home. Oh my gosh. Mind blown. Loved every bit of that. That was just so good. Yeah, I mean, if you have ears, that was just phenomenal. End of the video. See you guys next time. Alright, so let's dig into this a little bit. So the song starts off with really heavy atmospheric stuff. In fact, the song really does bounce back and forth between a couple of ideas. Or, yeah, a couple of ideas, two of them. Atmosphere, melody writing. Bounces between the two of those. That's the entire ebb and flow of the track. Now, granted, some of the melodic elements kind of move into more chaotic forms and they have more not chaotic forms. I mean, there's obviously an order to everything. It's not like there's raw chaos happening in some of these sections. Although, looking at some of their keyboard playing, I would say that they just kind of give in to chaos at some times, and just whatever buttons they hit is what the keyboard's going to do. But that's mostly in the atmospheric sections. When we get to the melodic ones, there's obviously an order to it all. It's pre-composed, everything is perfectly played, but it has feelings of chaos to it. Just bonkers amount of rhythmic ideas happening at any given time. So I really want to break this up into two sections of analysis: the atmospheric part and the melodic part. And the melodic part might be broken up into its own two sections because I do have two ways of creating melodies. And I already mentioned in the reaction that the guitarist balances out what the bass and the drummer are prone to do. They all have their own styles, and I think they do a great job of complementing one another. So, what's going on with the atmosphere here? A lot of the atmosphere is crafted from effects. A lot of it is effects heavy. Reverbs, delays, widening, all sorts of stuff I probably don't have the terminology for. I just don't understand that side of production. I'm barely getting into mixing right now. Just being able to make sure instruments are placed nicely, which is honestly something that was a bit odd here. I want to touch on that later, I think, when we get into production. It was kind of weirdly done at the end. So yeah, a lot of effects-driven atmospheres. We have the guitar, which seems to have a couple of settings where they can get extreme amounts of delay and reverb and a bunch of other stuff, so that one strum is going to just fill the entire sound sphere. That's the purpose of it. They also have two keyboards which also have similar stuff put on it to allow simple ideas. I saw it one time just kind of bouncing back and forth two notes, well, the same note, two octaves apart, to basically just build sounds, to get all these attacks in here that can be reverbed and widened and delayed so that they'll build on top of each other and grow into something larger. And I really enjoy the way they go about doing this just because it's not always calculated. In fact, I don't think much of it is calculated. Obviously, they're going to have some ideas, right? In the beginning, we're going to bounce back and forth on these about this speed. And we're going to build it that way. But there really isn't a sense of time in some of these atmospheric places, compounded on by what the drummer did in one of the last atmospheric sections, just kind of hitting hits whenever he felt like it. Really felt like the drummer is just slowing down there, but it really does feel like many of these atmospheric sections are free time by design. They're not supposed to have a rhythmic vibe to them, it's just supposed to be noise. Um, and to that effect, I think they do a great job at combining a little bit of improvisational aspect to pre-composed ideas. I don't know how much of the keyboard work is playing the exact same thing every time and how much of it is getting the exact vibe every time. The one time where the bassist was just like full palming groups of the keys, I'm going to wager that most of that is not accurate. I also noticed at one time the bassist was sort of fat fingering um, uh, two keys, and that's a tech term for like if you're typing and you accidentally hit two keys at the same time, it's because your fingers are too fat and hit two key fat. Okay. But yeah, it was like it was a G and a G sharp if I remember correctly, and just kind of dancing between them without any pattern, just kind of sometimes hitting them both, sometimes hitting one, sometimes hitting the other, and just kind of like it felt random. It's just kind of moving his hand back and forth in this little like micro area and then dropping his finger down in a pattern, and wherever it happened to be, if it hit both of them or just hit one of them, it really didn't matter. The point was not specifically to hit a specific note, it was to create a sound based on all the effects chains that are on it. Honestly, I think that the octave, the range that they're in, is more important than specific notes, in that probably could have done F and F sharp, G and G sharp, A and A sharp, and they all probably would have created a very similar vibe, mostly because I didn't hear too many specific notes or chords in this section. I'm sure that they are basing some of these off of chordal properties. For instance, I mentioned at the beginning that the bassist was doing what was that? That was B flats, right? Two octaves apart and just bouncing back and forth between those two. That note was probably specifically picked based off of what the guitar was playing at the time, or something like that. But not all the segments had a raw underlying idea of notes or chordal ideas. And I'd wager that for a lot of these situations, they can be a bit improvisational because the note itself doesn't matter. It's more about the range. You need to be in the right area. Uh, because obviously you can't hit something three octaves lower and get the same vibe. It's going to be a lower tone. We can even look at it like not only just that if you're aiming for a note this high and you get one this low, it's going to change the vibe, but it can also be affected different ways by the effects chains that you have on here. Maybe they just get super muddy when you get a lower note. So, range I think is important. The specific notes, maybe not so in every situation. And I really like that element to it. It brings, one, an unexpectedness to every performance of it, especially uh, uh, like this, where I have cameras up close on everything. If I'm in the audience, I'm not going to be able to see the nuance, and I already said I can't really hear much of a nuance here either, so maybe it won't be as important, but being able to view the performance up close like this and seeing different ideas being presented, different notes being played in some of these sections as they continue to experiment, because, like I said, it's not really about the notes, is very cool. Assuming, again, that that's the angle they're going for there. I really liked here at the beginning because our drummer started with padded mallets. which is just very cool. And of course, used them for the cymbals. And as soon as that was over, chucked them for drumsticks. But it was just really nice to see that. You know, padded mallets have a very different timbre, especially for rolling cymbal work. That obviously they utilized for this specific reason, but it's just something we don't see in rock and metal too often. If you're gonna roll your cymbals, you typically just stick with your drumsticks. So it's just really nice to see that angle. I do really think that this drummer is classically trained, or at least formally trained. I think that's the word I want. Classically trained sounds kind of weird for me for a drum kit, because there's not really many drum kits in classical music. But formally trained is probably a better phrase for that. So that is a breakdown of pretty much all of the atmospheric sections. I didn't break down any specific ideas in them because honestly, it's all just a lot of noise. The purpose is mostly to fill space and to contrast the more rhythmically hectic ideas and the slower, groovier ideas that we hear in the melodic sections. There is one atmospheric section that I felt was very, uh, what's the word for it? Where it's functional, right? Which is right at the beginning. The guitarist had switched to a cleaner guitar tone and started playing some guitar stuff. The bass was doing its thing, and the guitar switched back to something atmospheric, lots of reverb and stuff. And I noticed the drummer was doing something. It looked like it was opening or closing the hi hat, just messing with the drum kit a little bit, and the bassist was doing something on the keyboard, some setup stuff. And this section was the only one that felt a little bit out of place as far as the flow goes, as we had just entered into a clean melodic section. We were in it for like 4 bars before shifting back out into an atmospheric section, and everybody else was setting up while the guitarist was filling the space. So it felt more functional than form, which would be, what the song demands. But otherwise, the atmospheric sections, at least in my ears, tend to be purposefully as a contrasting element, a breather, if you will, both for us, the listener, and for them, because, I mean, the chops required to just keep all this up constantly. Having a moment just relax and breathe and prepare for the next insane section is, well, it's real nice sometimes coming from a performer. Um, I don't think I ever played anything quite this technical, but I mean, you're playing trumpet and you got a nice technical line. Maybe you're up above the staff, you're a bit higher up in the octave. Maybe sometimes you're even getting into the doubles, double C, double D, just really up there. And then just having even 4 bar rest while the rest of the band does something is it's very welcome in those situations after you really push your limits for a moment, just to have that couple of moments to recuperate. So yeah, having the ebb and flow here between the chaotic sections that are really pushing their musicianship and the calmer sections, whether it's the groovier bits or just the pure atmosphere, definitely something that I could see them looking forward to, both to sort of celebrate, yeah, I nailed it this time, love that, and just to kind of calm down and get your brain ready for the next wild idea that's going to be coming up. Now, the other half of this track is the melodic side. And like I mentioned, there's kind of 2 modes here. We have our groovy mode and our chaotic mode, and they are, I kind of want to separate them, but there's also a few instances where they just sort of merge. I can't really tell which mode they're in. Sort of doing both at the same time. So I guess we'll just kind of do that here. We'll start with the calmer section and slowly transform until we're talking about the more chaotic stuff. Um, so right there at the beginning, I think it was our second section of the track, we have this moment where everything just kind of comes together rhythmically into something that is super groovy. Our bassist is laying down this nice idea. Our guitarist has a couple of notes here and there. a really nice, slow, methodical phrasing to it, um, which we'll get into that in a second, but I think it's a really key aspect to my enjoyment of the song. And our drummer has a really laid back, um, still rock style of drumming, but very chill. It's not quite jazz drumming. It's still got a little bit more wider movements to it. There's a bit of harsher accentuation on all the hits, but it's definitely a light rock kind of vibe. Very chill, laid back, sparse playing. And I think this section works really well as an introduction to the group. We kind of heard their electronic side, right? We got to hear what they can do with effects chains and how they can create these textural environments. And now we get to hear some of the musicianship. And I love the melodic flow on the guitar. It never really gets too fancy. It's really all about the emotion of it, really emotive playing, holding out notes and having these clean little runs between them, and then holding out a new note, and ensuring that the story is being told in a manner that feels natural, right? If you're reading a book and you start reading like this and you read a million miles a second, and then everybody's trying to listen to what you're saying, but you really don't even know what you're saying because you're just reading so fast. It's impressive that you can speak with that speed, but the story is not being understood by people, right? And I think that's the first time I brought up that analogy, but that's typically what I mean when I want, really strong melodic flow in guitar solos. Anytime that an instrument is going to take the lead, yes, watching a guitarist shred for an entire solo is impressive, but the story can get lost in that unless the story is about the speed. And sometimes that's true, but not all the time. And I really love the flow of this guitarist here. Every time that they get the spotlight and they're carrying the lead melody, there's just a real nice smoothness to the way that they craft their story. Um, and they obviously have the chops to play faster, but there's a restraint because they're really interested in telling an emotive story, of really connecting with the audience about what they want to say. And I mentioned that this is it balances out with the other two instrumentalists because, to me, the most impressive aspect of them is that when they get the spotlight, they go ham. And so if we only had the technical aspect and the speed and the chaos of that, I think it'd be overwhelming. I would be overwhelmed. But having it bounce back and forth between these guitar led slower sections that really just lean into the groove and the atmosphere, and then the more chaotic ones that, at least to me, are led by the bass and the drummer, it just creates a nice balance between everything and allows the song to have moments to breathe without giving up forward momentum. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or if it's intentional that the guitarist leads these breathing moments with their melodic style, but it just works so well. In these sections, we do get a little bit of bass work. The bass does not usually just sit at the bottom and play a single note. We get some walking bass lines, we get some sick licks, and, and overall, I just really enjoy the bassist role here, which is to augment what the guitarist is doing. I just mentioned the guitarist mostly holds out notes and has a couple of licks. The bassist helps fills in the extra space in a different range, so it doesn't really detract from what the guitar is doing. It adds to it. When it's holding out a note, it provides a little counter melody in those sections, but it's done in a different ear because they're both panned, if I remember correctly, and it's done in a different pitch. We have our guitar up here and our bass down there, so it never interferes. It's just a secondary thing that you can listen to if you want without clashing with our primary. And it's always done in a tasteful way. It's never done to create intensity or anything like that. It's really done to continue on with the vibe of having this chill, mellow section filled with these groovy aspects that pushes the song forward. Our drummer has some neat ideas, but mostly they're just holding down the rhythm. It's done in a rather fanciful way. There's always little embellishing ideas. It's not like the drummer ever sits there and just plays, quarter notes on the hi-hat and alternating bass and snare on every other beat. There's always something interesting being done here, but it's done in a way that is very palatable. It's very groovy and fits in with what, obviously, what the whole band is doing, but what the rhythm is, dictating. Never really goes too hard into it, but never lightens up enough where it just becomes a metronome. And I really love that middle point there. In fact, that's kind of the whole group in this section. The bassist is walking the bass line. There's always movement. Like I said, it's not like the bass ever just sits on a single note for an entire bar. But it's also slow enough that it supports what the guitar is doing rather than overshadows it by shredding. And the guitarist finds a nice medium point between showing off some chops. Like I said, there's some nice licks in between some of these held out notes and allowing their melody to breathe. There's a balance in everything in these calmer sections, and it just works very well. They also have a great notion of dynamic storytelling where you can feel the intensity of sections increase, whether notes come at us faster, or maybe the volume rises, or maybe the drummer stops playing and there's this tension of a couple of beats where there's just nothing there. We either add or remove things to change the flow of the section that meets what we need. There are very few times that I think we just abruptly shift from one style to the next. There's usually a good story that brings us into it. That's not to say that there aren't times that abruptly shift, and a couple of them got a good chuckle out of me because they had already set up the precedent that they do this really great flow between ideas. So when we jump between them, they basically pulled the rug out from under me that they placed there themselves, right? Earlier in the song, oh, can you move for a little bit? Gonna put this rug here. It really opens the room up. And then like 2 minutes later, they're like, yoink, gotcha. Um, but yeah, just they do a really good job at setting things up like that. Now, next is our chaotic sections. And of course, like I said, they're not chaotic in that there's entropy involved in them. Everything is expertly laid out and expertly played with extreme precision. But the sections are very chaotic to listen to. There's a lot of things happening at any one time. Our guitar can be doing any sorts of number of things that include playing fast, holding out notes, and including guitar or effect chains in here as well to add more chaos to the texture of their instrument. Our bassist, this is really interesting right here. Our bassist tends to just play fast, usually with some rhythmically syncopated ideas, but there's also these full bar runs here that are just like 8th and 16th notes shred. And the crazy thing is, I had mentioned that when the bass came in, I said that I really loved the tone. It had this nice round warmth to it. And it leads itself, or yeah, it lends itself, that's the word I want, very well to the sort of groovy, chill atmosphere we got at the beginning. It is just a very nice, laid back bass sound. It's not sharp. In fact, I use the term round because it is a very palatable sound without a lot of edges. But I don't know if it is a effects thing. I don't think I ever saw the bassist hit any pedals or anything while they were playing. Most of the stuff that they messed around with in that realm was for their keyboard. I could be wrong. I could have just missed something. But when we get to these heavier sections, though, it has to be, or at least from what I saw, has to be a plucking technique. Or, yeah, picking technique, I guess is the right term for it. Because the bass takes on this very sharp pointed attack. And this has to be just some really sharp, rigid finger picking, right? Just, really getting these smooth lines in this earlier one, and then like turning, really getting like a quick, sharp, robotic movement out of these, but at the speed that he's going at. Like, it just kind of blows my mind that there's that much pressure and still being nimble enough to play at this type of level. Just kind of blows my mind if that's what's happening. But the bass takes on this very aggressive tone. It feels like each hit is actively jumping out of the instrument at me. It's kind of bonkers, but I don't know. It might be a effects thing. I don't know. If it isn't, and this is the same tone just with a different technique, I mean, my mind is blown because it works so good at both sides of the coin. And of course, I think the bass needs it, especially for some of the lines that they're doing and some of the aggression they want out of this section. The drummer's playing heavier. The volume of the entire song has come up. The bass needs to have that same intensity as well, and we get it out of these attacks. They're just very sharp and aggressive. And it almost sounds like slapping, right? It's got that really nice, or not slap, popping. Yeah, popping. That's when you pull the string off and release it, and you get that really sharp attack. That's what it feels like. But I watched the basses do these, and obviously, a slap run at that speed is going to be, or a pop run at that speed is going to be insane. Maybe even impossible. But yeah, I mean, I watched the dude. He finger picked the whole thing, but he's just got this super sharp attack on it. I'm gonna have to watch it again just because. I mean, I was blown away. I'm probably gonna watch it anyways. I'm gonna show it to everybody I know. But yeah, just really blown away with some of the aggressive bass playing that I heard. That I still think is the same tone. Like he's really getting that all of that out of his technique. Um, and then we gotta talk about the drummer here. The drummer just The dude is a beast. Anything he touches, man. His runs, his fills, his ornamental ideas, his volume dynamics, his variety in technique. The dude just got it all. Really does. And I'm pretty sure that the floor tom, one of the legs, gave way, which is why the tom was mostly flat, probably angled a little bit, but really dipped like this. In the one part, he's supposed to be doing a roll, two-handed roll on it. And yeah, the drum just like super dipped, and you can see he shifted just the left hand and popped it up and was like messing with the lock on it to relock the leg's height. Because toms have three, I think toms have three legs on them, and they all have adjustable height. And I'm pretty sure that it just got the key got too loose, so instead of holding the drum, the leg sunk into it and brought it forward. So he had to raise the leg back up and relock it one handed while keeping that fast roll in his other hand. That's what I think happened. But yeah, if so, just super impressive. I mean, that to me is the hallmark of a great performer. And this is something I've talked about with a couple of different people across, the 2 years I've been doing this, with these live performances of seeing the hiccups and just rolling through them, right? Accepting that you make mistakes and just getting through them and continuing on like nothing happened, or at least visually like nothing happened. The drummer could have been berating himself in his head the whole time. I told you it wasn't tight enough. I really should have tightened it and checked it again before we started the performance. That could have been going through their mind. But visually, what I saw in the body was very calm and collected. I got a problem. Let's address it and continue the show, and let's keep moving like nothing happened. And that is, to me, the hallmark of the greatest performers. It's not about how good you are at playing, it's how good you are at moving past mistakes and even sometimes just completely ignoring them. It is very possible that we have all been to concerts and seen dozens, if not hundreds, of live mistakes that we never even picked up on because no one brought attention to it. And yeah, I've talked about this before. Everybody flubs. It's about how you deal with it. But yeah, hallmark of a great musician, and he took that what I perceived to be a technical difficulty with stride and just kept the show going as best he could, and just phenomenal. But yeah, other than that though, the dude's just got chops, man. His fills, the intensity of his playing, the length that he keeps some of these rolls up, the frequency that he plays these fast rolls. And just the amount of movement the dude has across the entire drum kit. There was that one moment near the end where he was playing the don't let a cymbal stop moving" game, and just bouncing between all the cymbals while also interjecting all these lower, tom and snare hits in between, and just, man, it was all over the place. And then he'd switch from that to like a cross stick technique, and then get like a little jazzy idea and dance on like the ride cymbal, and just like, it was heavy. It was very metal in a lot of places. It was jazzy. It was rockish. It was very chill. It just, yeah, the dude has just a massive depth to his skill, a wide variety to it all. Really blew me away there. So, that pretty much lays out what everybody was doing in every section of the song and how they all flowed together. What does it mean though? I don't know. This is a weird case where I absolutely enjoyed mostly just existing in the song. I don't really know that many of these sections flowed together to create an overarching story. This isn't like, you know, like a prog rock long slow burn where like I'm taken on a journey while I listen to it. Most of that is probably because I wasn't really listening to the vibe of the music. I was being blown away by the musicianship. It's possible that on a second, third, or fourth listen, as the novelty of the performance begins to wear off, I can really engage with the art. But right here, it's just a series of ideas that went together nicely and sounded fantastic together, and I really enjoyed each individual section. But overall, I didn't get much of a vibe that, uh, you know, a vibe or story overall. Right? I just enjoyed a lot of the sections individually. So, I mean, I guess there's one other thing I can talk about, and that's the time signature. I have no idea what was going on there at the end. The entire song was in 3/4 up until that final section, which I think was in 4/4, but the drummer was really pushing against it, playing around the downbeats, doubly so on bars 2 and 4 of the 4-bar phrase, and the bass and the guitar were laying into the same rhythmic ideas that the drummer was, so it was really difficult to nail that down. I'm 90% certain the first 3 bars are 4/4, but the last bar, at least on every other repetition, so this would be bars 8 and 16 and 24, were a hair bit odd in that it felt like there was more time, but when I counted it out, I wasn't really sure because there's a bit of a moment there where we don't get any accents at the end of the bar. So it could have been something like 9/8 or 5/4, just a hair bit longer than 4/4. I'm not entirely sure, and I never really got a strong understanding of that specific bar. But like I said, I'm fairly certain that a majority of that section is in 4/4. There might be one bar per phrasing that is a little bit longer. But I'm also fairly confident that that 4/4 is a polyrhythm or a polymeter idea. The 4/4 is not presented in any of the instruments. It's very possible that they're playing in a different time signature, but I felt a 4 from some source. So it, like I said, it could be possible that that's not 4/4 in their heads. I'm feeling a 4 pulse. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're feeling or that they wrote it in a 4 pulse, because like I said, the 4 isn't really there at all. So yeah, that could be a polymetric idea that I presented, but it's what made the most sense to me. Alright, those are my thoughts on the Physics House Band's Teratology. Let me know what you thought of that, if you enjoyed it or not, anything you'd like to add on to my analysis or correct me on. Go ahead and hit me up in the comments with those. Above the comment section is a description box, and there is a link for Linktree. I don't know, feeling wacky today. Anyways, Linktree is awesome. That place right there. It's a menu, it's a bunch of buttons in it. They take you to places that are related to the channel. You can pick up merch, support the channel through Patreon or special selection. You can join the Discord and communicate with the community at large. I'm also active on the Discord. You can email me, follow me on Twitter, a bunch of stuff. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three of those. All right. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to finish up our week of Women of Rock and check out our creator request. Something we haven't done in a while since we did Pride Month requests last month for Pride Month. So we'll get back to checking out creator requests. It's been building up a little bit, so I'm excited to dig into it, try to shorten the list a bit, and see what's being presented. Creator request is usually smaller bands asking for their stuff to be covered and reviewed, and we found some phenomenal stuff through the program, so I'm always excited to dig into it. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.